those of you just tuning into KNST, my name is Kirsten Almeida, here to help you provide your Japanese news in English. Up next, we will discuss what is city pop, its origins, and why it's made a recent comeback in some circles. Stay tuned after this short break. And welcome back once more. My name is Kirsten Almeida from KNST, here to tell you more about city pop and its origins. Before we discuss city pop itself, it's important to understand the time frame in which it occurred in. From the end of World War II up into the early 1990s, Japan experienced something called an economic miracle. This miracle is generally defined as Japan's largest economic growth since the end of the war, and it catapulted them to become the world's second largest economy, just below the United States itself. During this time, music began to reflect Japan's growing urbanization. Artists like Mariya Takeuchi, Taeko Ohnuki, Miki Matsubara, and others debuted with a Western sound that fit Japan's new cosmopolitan image. As a result of the good economy and new music, Japan entered this dreamlike state, or bubble, shall we call it, where peaceful times became a trademark of the 1980s itself. City pop reflected this carefree state Japan had come into, and it showed this sense of optimism that someone growing up during this Japanese bubble would have experienced when they looked around themselves and saw just how prosperous everyone around them was. Unfortunately, Japan's bubble economy was not meant to last forever, as it inevitably popped in the 1990s. As for what caused this bubble to explode, it's a little bit difficult to explain, but if you're an American, the easiest way that I can explain this is to compare it to the 2008 financial crisis that the United States experienced, as the factors were essentially the same. The difference is, while the United States seemed to recover, Japan unfortunately did not do as well. And so, with the 1990s, or the lost decade as the Japanese call it, those who grew up during those times could not relate as well as the previous generation before them to the music of city pop, as the times were no longer as jovial and happy and as peaceful as they once were. And so city pop and its dreamlike qualities faded away and were buried for a period of time. Until recently, when city pop was rediscovered by a new genre of artists. In the early 2010s, a new genre by the name of vaporwave started to appear in the internet. As for what vaporwave is, well, its whole style is basically rooted in 1980s and 1990s culture and especially music. And what vaporwave artists would do is they would go back to find these older songs, sample them, and create a whole new sort of mood music that listeners began to actually listen to. And of course, the more listeners that this music got, the more these same listeners began to ask where they got their source material from. And when they learned that it was from city pop began to have a whole new generation of new listeners that listened for not only its nostalgia, but for its musical talent. Old city pop artists who may have not been as well known internationally during their times are now getting newfound popularity among today's generation as they begin to learn more about them and their music. Personally, I hadn't discovered city pop through vaporwave or anything of the sort. Instead, I found it through natural discovery on the internet, most notably YouTube. And the first city pop song I had ever listened to was Plastic Love by Mariya Takeuchi. I wasn't totally blown away by the song when I had first heard of it, and so I didn't understand the hype that came with it. It was only after I listened to it a couple more times that I began to understand why people were so enamored with the song. The song Plastic Love tells about the story of a young woman who gets her heart broken, but eventually finds herself back again at the local discotheque, where she meets another young man who promises to love her and not hurt her like the one before. However, instead of taking the commitment She, now cynical, instead warns him not to get too close to her, as she knows that the sort of fling that she's looking for is not serious and rather something that she calls plastic love. Although someone may have never experienced heartbreak, never have gone to Tokyo, Japan, or generally lived throughout the 1980s, there is a quality about the song that makes the listener feel like they have lived through all three of them. And that is probably why the song has become so popular within city pop itself. It's the fact that the song can evoke such intense imagery that listeners cannot help but become enchanted by. Plastic Love, unlike most city pop songs, is this ode to loneliness that is extremely real and doesn't mince words when it comes to the pangs of heartbreak and whatnot. And in today's generation, when we greatly value authenticity, it is something that we cannot help but feel drawn to, especially as we are now in the age of nostalgia. We cannot help but listen to Takeuchi's young voice sing about something that is still so relatable to this day. However, so as to not end this broadcast on a sour note, I would like to thank my listeners who have stuck throughout this whole explanation of city pop, and that you guys have learned something new about this, and that you will hopefully give this music more of a listening to. This is Kirsten Almeida from KNST, now signing out.